My name is Ruth. I am 78 years old, and I want to begin softly, not with a fear, not with something meant to shock you. For most of my life, I carried a belief I never consciously chose.
And before we talk about anything else, I want to slow the room down for a moment because when people talk about aging, they often talk fast. They talk in headlines, they talk in warnings, they talk in numbers and prescriptions and quick fixes. And when the subject is intimacy, especially for older women, people either turn it into a joke or they turn away. So I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to speak calmly, I'm going to speak honestly, and I'm going to speak with respect. Not because life after 60 is fragile, it isn't, but because it deserves dignity. I spent many years afraid of what I thought later life would feel like. I didn't say it out loud, but I carried a private fear that my world would get smaller and quieter in a painful way, that I would lose the parts of myself that made me feel alive, that I would become invisible, that I would be past something. Maybe you know that fear. And if you do, I want you to hear this early. Intimacy after 60 doesn't end, it evolves. Different doesn't mean worse, different can mean truer. Now, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist. I'm not here to diagnose anyone's body or tell you what you should do with your life. This is not medical advice. If you're dealing with medical concerns, medications, pain, depression that feels unmanageable, please get proper support. What I am is a woman who has lived long enough to notice patterns. And one pattern is this: the story we're taught about aging is often incomplete. And when your story is incomplete, you mistake normal change for personal failure. Let me ask you a question. When you think about getting older, what scares you first? For most people, it isn't money, it isn't even illness, it's loneliness. That fear is everywhere, and it comes from something we were taught very early on. We were taught that intimacy and sex are the same thing. They are not. I believed they were for most of my life. When my partner died, I remember thinking that a door had closed forever. No more warmth, no more closeness, no more being wanted. And for a while, that belief felt true. Not because it was true, but because it was the only explanation I had. Society never offered me another definition of intimacy. So when the old one stopped fitting, I assumed something inside me must be broken. Nothing was broken. The explanation was incomplete. Now, let me speak honestly. Yes, your body changes after 60. Things slow down, sensations soften, energy shifts. And if you are a woman, no one prepares you for how quiet it can feel inside. Not empty, quiet. Many women reach this stage and think something is wrong with them, but your body is not saying you are finished, it is saying, I need something different now. Different does not mean worse, it means new. Let me tell you what I learned. The first lesson changed everything for me. Loneliness is not about sex, it is about being seen. When I was younger, I thought closeness meant physical connection, and when that changed, I believed closeness had left with it. But the deepest intimacy I have ever known did not come from bodies. It came from being understood without explaining myself, from being listened to without being corrected, from being allowed to exist exactly as I was. That kind of intimacy does not disappear with age, it deepens. Because when you are older, you are tired of pretending. You are no longer interested in performance. You want presence. You want to be met where you are. I remember standing in a grocery store years after my partner passed. It was an ordinary day, nothing meaningful on the surface. The cashier asked the usual question, "How are you today?" Most days I would say fine and keep moving, but that day I didn't have the energy to pretend. I said, "Some days are heavy, but I'm trying to make them softer." She stopped what she was doing for a second. She looked at me, not past me, not through me, at me. And she said, "My grandmother used to say that, make it softer." Then she smiled like she meant it, not like a customer service smile, like a human smile. That exchange took maybe 20 seconds, but I walked out of that store feeling held. Not by romance, not by sex, by recognition. And I realized something that day. Loneliness isn't about the absence of a body, it's about the absence of being seen. If you feel lonely, you don't always need a romantic solution. Sometimes you need a human one. Sometimes you need to be in places where you are reflected back to yourself, where your presence matters. That's lesson 1. Now, let me give you a simple frame that helped me stop panicking. There are 3 forms of intimacy, and sex is only one possible doorway, not the whole house. The first is emotional intimacy, being seen, being safe, being able to tell the truth without punishment. The second is physical intimacy, not performance, not pressure, just warmth, touch that comforts, a hand held, a long hug, sitting close, the quiet language of care. And the third is meaning intimacy, feeling connected to life itself, to purpose, to community, to nature, to small rituals that remind you you're part of something larger than your fears. When people say they're afraid of aging, they often think they're afraid of losing sex, but most of the time what they're afraid of is losing these 3 kinds of intimacy. And here is the good news. All 3 can grow with age, but not if you keep measuring yourself by the old script. The second lesson surprised me even more. Pleasure does not disappear with age. It moves. When you are young, pleasure is loud, fast, demanding. As you grow older, pleasure becomes quieter. But it also becomes richer. It lives in places you once rushed past. A warm drink on a cold morning, sunlight through a window, a conversation that doesn't need to go anywhere. These moments do not chase you, but they stay with you. Youth taught me intensity. Age taught me depth. The third lesson took me many years to accept. You are not too old to want things. Society rarely says this directly. It simply implies that your wanting should be smaller now. Be grateful, slow down, do not ask for more. But wanting joy does not expire. Wanting connection does not expire. Wanting to feel alive does not expire. I did not understand this until I was 68. I wish I had learned it at 40. One Sunday afternoon, I was sitting in my living room watching the sunlight move slowly across the floor. I thought about how many Sundays I had spent waiting for someone to invite me, waiting for the world to include me again, waiting for my life to feel like it belonged to me again. And I asked myself, if no one was watching, what would I do? The answer came fast. I would take a class. I would learn something new. I would put myself in a room where my mind had to wake up. So I signed up for a small community course. Nothing fancy, just a few evenings with people learning together. On the first day, my hands shook when I walked in, not from age, from fear. I was the oldest person in the room. I imagined everyone would stare. I imagined pity. I imagined judgment. None of that happened. People were too busy being nervous about their own lives. And halfway through that first class, I realized I could breathe again. I went home and cried, not because it was sad, because I remembered that beginnings still belonged to me. That's lesson 2. You are not too old to want joy, to want connection, to want newness. Wanting does not make you selfish, it makes you alive. The 4th lesson changed how I see solitude. Being alone is not the same as being unloved. After my partner died, there were nights when the house felt too quiet. The silence had weight. It's hard to describe if you haven't lived it. You can hear the refrigerator. You can hear your own thoughts. You can hear time. And for a while, I fought that silence. I filled it with television, with noise, with distractions. I thought the goal was to not feel it. But one morning, I took my coffee into the garden. The air was cool, the sun was gentle, and I sat there without trying to fix anything. I listened to birds. I watched light on leaves. I watched my own breath. And I had a thought that surprised me. This is enough. Not forever, not as a life sentence, but as a moment. I was alone, and I was not lonely. Solitude, when it's chosen, can be nourishment. Loneliness is not the same thing. Loneliness is disconnection. Solitude can be reconnection with your own nervous system, with your own mind, with life itself. That's lesson 3. Now let me pull these lessons together into the 5 truths I wish someone had told me earlier. Truth 1. Your value does not expire. I know how obvious that sounds when you say it out loud, but a lot of us don't live like we believe it. We live like our worth was tied to being wanted in a narrow way. We live like our worth depends on attention, on youth, on usefulness, on being easy to love. But your worth is not a product with a sell-by date. You are allowed to take up space at any age. You are allowed to be complex. You are allowed to have needs. You are allowed to want. Truth 2. Intimacy is not a performance. A lot of us learned intimacy as a kind of stage. You do the right things, you look the right way, you keep up with expectations, and if you can't keep up, you assume you're failing. But real intimacy is not performance. It's presence. It's safety. It's truth. If you feel pressure, shame, or fear in the place where you're supposed to feel close, that is not intimacy. That is a script. Truth 3. Pleasure changes, and that can be a gift. When you're young, pleasure is often fast and loud. It's chasing, it's urgency. As you age, pleasure becomes quieter. But quieter doesn't mean weaker. It can mean deeper. It can mean more honest. Pleasure can live in small moments: warm tea, sunlight, a song that makes you cry, a conversation that doesn't rush you, laughter with someone who knows your story. If you've lost one kind of pleasure, you haven't lost pleasure. You've lost a map. You can draw a new one. Truth 4. Being alone is not the same as being unloved. This one matters because grief can distort your mind. After loss, the brain wants a simple conclusion. I'm alone, therefore I'm unloved. I'm alone, therefore I'm finished. But love is bigger than one relationship, and connection is bigger than romance. There are friends who can see you. There are communities that can hold you. There are younger people who need your steadiness. There are older people who need your honesty. There is the quiet companionship of routine and nature and purpose. Truth 5. Letting go of the old script is the beginning of freedom. Most of us carry a timeline. We think life is supposed to look a certain way at certain ages. We think there are right milestones. We think if we miss them, we failed. But what if that script was written by someone who never lived your life? What if it was never yours to begin with? At some point, you get to put the script down. And when you do, something surprising happens. You stop trying to prove you still belong. You start choosing how you belong. Now, I want to pause and do something a little different. I want to guide you through a short reflection. If you're driving, keep your eyes on the road. If you're walking, just listen. If you're sitting, you can close your eyes if that feels safe. Here are 3 questions. You don't have to answer out loud. Just notice what happens inside you. First question. Who taught you what intimacy is supposed to look like? Was it a parent, a religion, a movie, a past relationship, a moment of shame, a moment of praise? Second question. What are you afraid would happen if you stopped trying to match that definition? Would you feel relieved? Would you feel exposed? Would you feel free? Would you feel grief? Third question. What kind of closeness do you actually want now? Not what you think you should want, not what makes you look normal, not what keeps people comfortable. What do you want? Maybe you want to be held. Maybe you want to be listened to. Maybe you want companionship. Maybe you want a body that feels safe to live in. Maybe you want peace. Whatever answer comes, treat it gently. That answer is not a problem. It's a signal. Now let me say the anchor again, because this is the center of everything. Intimacy after 60 doesn't end, it evolves. And different doesn't mean worse. Different can mean truer. Now I'm going to give you something practical, not a philosophy, a small plan, because an old script doesn't disappear because you heard one good sentence. It changes when your nervous system experiences new evidence. So here is a 7-day connection reset. It is simple on purpose. It is meant to be doable, and you can repeat it whenever you feel yourself sliding back into fear. Day 1, 10 minutes of quiet. No phone, no news, no scrolling. Sit somewhere and let your body settle. Notice your shoulders, notice your jaw, notice your breath. You are not trying to meditate perfectly, you are simply proving to yourself that you can be with your own life for 10 minutes. Day 2. Reach out without a reason. Send one message, make one call, write one note, something small that says, "I thought of you." Not a big conversation, just a thread of connection. Day 3. Give your body comfort on purpose. Warm tea, a slow shower, lotion on your hands, a blanket, a walk in sunlight. Do it slowly, like you're teaching your body that it still deserves care. Day 4. Say one sentence that begins with "I want." It can be tiny. I want to feel calm. I want to laugh. I want someone to talk to. I want to start again. Say it out loud. Let the words exist in the room. Day 5. Do one thing only because it brings you joy, not productivity, not being useful, not earning, just joy. A song, a movie, a hobby, a walk, painting, gardening, a library, a cafe. Day 6. Choose solitude and name it correctly. Spend time alone and refuse to call it loneliness. Call it rest. Call it peace. Call it recovery. Notice the difference that name makes. Day 7. Write your new definition of intimacy. Keep it simple, one sentence. Intimacy is being known. Intimacy is safety. Intimacy is shared presence. Intimacy is connection, not performance. Then read it to yourself, not as a slogan, as permission. Now, if you do this for 7 days, you won't become a new person overnight, but you will become more honest. And honesty is where the new chapter begins. Let me give you a few signs you're moving in the right direction. Signs that you're not shrinking, you're evolving. You feel calmer in your own company. You reach out sooner instead of waiting until you're desperate. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What do I need now?" You let pleasure be quiet without dismissing it. You notice moments of connection that don't require romance to be real. Those are not small changes. Those are foundational changes. Now, I want to speak to anyone listening who is grieving. If grief is fresh, everything I am saying can feel impossible. You can listen to wisdom and still feel hollow. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means grief is real. You do not have to positive think your way through loss. Get support. Talk to someone qualified. Let people help you. A new script doesn't mean doing it alone. And I want to speak to anyone who is in a relationship and feels confused about intimacy. You are allowed to renegotiate. You are allowed to talk. You are allowed to say, "My body is different now, and I want closeness that feels safe." Closeness should not come with pressure. It should come with care. Now, I'll tell you what my life looks like now, because people often assume the happy ending is a particular kind of romance. My life does not look like what I expected when I was younger. I wake up and I'm not sad by default. I have friends who call just to hear my voice. I have small routines that keep me steady. I take walks. I try new things. I learn. I rest. I sit in the sun and do absolutely nothing some days, and I don't punish myself for it. I feel connected, not in one way, not to one person, but to life. And the strangest part is this: I feel more myself now than I did when I was younger and trying so hard to fit someone else's idea of what life should be. So here is the closing truth, and I want you to hold it gently, not like a demand. Life after 60, after the things you thought defined closeness begin to change, is not smaller. It can be richer. It can be quieter. It can be more honest than anything you've known. Different does not mean worse. Different can mean truer. If you take nothing else, take this. You were not made to expire. You were made to evolve, and you are allowed to write the next chapter with your own hands. If this helped you, share it with someone who might need it. Someone out there is sitting alone right now, thinking their life is over. It isn't, and they deserve to hear that. Thank you for listening.